Mark Pinsley, Democrat for Pennsylvania's Auditor General. Why are you running for this office?
Well, I mean, it's an important office for democracy these days. One of the big things that you get to do is make the government more transparent, which is the number one reason that I'm running. I think that transparency is the beginning of democracy.
What are the required duties of Auditor General?
So I'd like to start with, I'm the controller right now in Lehigh County, and it helps to sort of explain it. So in Lehigh County, what we do is we audit payroll every 2 weeks. We audit vendor payments. When you think about that, then you take it up to the next level, which is Auditor General, and they do statewide auditing. So we'll audit things like the fuel tax, we'll audit the firefighters. Really anything that the government spends money on, we can audit and bring information to light.
Now, as a controller, do you audit the same things on a regular schedule? Just how does that work? What guides you in your efforts within your current office in Lehigh Valley?
Yeah, so there are both state, federal, and local guidelines that we have to follow in terms of things that we have to audit. Payroll being one of them, obviously. It's the most important, it's one of the largest expenditures that we have individually. And the same thing at the state level. They have guidelines that the state has put in place and that also the federal government has put in place. A lot of it has to do with where the money comes from as to what you have to audit.
And let's talk about the basic goals of State Auditor General, and I'm sure they can be similar to the position you hold currently.
Yeah. I mean, I think the basic thing to think about is transparency, 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 right? The goal is to be able to look at where the government is spending money and then assure the public that it's being spent in the way that it was meant to be spent. And then also, we're like the IRS, right? We come in and we audit you. I don't get Christmas cards, right? Because people are not necessarily happy to open up what they're doing. But we're not there to fine you or to put you in jail. We're there to make sure that the people are getting the right thing for their money, and then ultimately to make recommendations that you could follow.
And speaking of recommendations, can you tell us about how many state departments and programs would be subject to regular audits?
Well, all of them are subject to audits. All agencies within Pennsylvania are subject to.
And which ones usually historically get the most attention? Let me put it that way.
Yeah, there's about 15 different, and I don't know that I can name them off.
You don't have to, but a few that come to mind, tell me.
Yeah, so health is one of them, the Department of Health. You would also have the Department, the liquid fuel tax is another one that you'll see a lot of. There are firefighters that we audit on a regular basis because we give money to the firefighters, especially the independents.
Liquid fuel tax, this is something we pay at the pump?
That's correct. Yep. We also audit other things that we spend money on, for example, would be the state police. We also audit the jail. So basically, in a broad stroke, criminal justice is something that we audit. We audit the money that comes in, so property tax, sales tax, all of those things are subject to audit.
And you mentioned that transparency is very important. So somewhat expanding on that goal, how can the Auditor General ensure then that Pennsylvania tax dollars are spent in a legal manner? In other words, there must be basic legal requirements anyway.
Yes. So there are requirements. A lot of them come out due to bills or whatever is controlling that particular function.
Yeah, try to give an example if you can.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe it's something you deal with currently as controller.
I was thinking about trying to relate it back and forth. So for example, we audit the cash boxes of the judicial system. Right, so people come in, they pay fines, and we make sure that the fines and the receipts are matching what's coming in. Right, so that's a very basic, straightforward audit that I think everyone can kind of understand. Right.
Well, when you say cash box, you mean literally cash?
It could be cash, could be checks. Today it could be credit card. Yeah, I mean, so imagine that you have to pay, a fee for to get the boot taken off of your car.
Good example.
Right. So something like that could be paid by cash by some people, right? Could be credit card, could be a check. We audit all of that to make sure that the money that was requested by the government was paid by the individual and then made it to our bank. Right. So that's sort of the process. On the healthcare side, for example, one of the things that we audited was the the pharmacy benefit managers. So the pharmacy benefit manager is a health insurance company that nobody hears about. But basically what they do is when you go to the pharmacy and you pay your $10 copay and it's a $100 drug, we pay the rest. The county pays the rest or the state pays the rest. So one of the things that I wanted to see, for example, was, okay, we pay the $90 to the healthcare company. They are then supposed to pay that $90 to the pharmacy. So I asked them, show me that you're paying that $90 to the pharmacy. Oh, I'm sorry, sir, we can't do that. Well, why? Well, it's proprietary. So then I go to the pharmacy and I say, hey, can you assure me that you got the $90 that we paid? No, I'm sorry, we can't do that. We have a gag clause from the pharmacy benefit manager. So is that illegal? It's not what we agreed upon. Right, so we can go to the contract and we say, what did we agree upon? We agreed that you were going to act as an administrator, not that you were going to take anything off the top. And that is happening at the state level right now. There's probably $100 million that we're overpaying simply because of that spread that's happening right now.
Well, which departments or programs within state government need additional oversight? I mean, especially when education is concerned, obviously. And, of course, we just heard the governor's new budget proposal, and he wants to boost spending for education. And then there's always debate about how that money is distributed. Yeah.
So there's a couple of things there. First off, there used to be an audit for the schools that is no longer being done. We have to put that back in place. That doesn't help necessarily. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't help. What it does is it stops people from sort of doing normal routine things that they shouldn't be doing. Like when you know you have an audit coming, you do things the right way. When you know there's not an audit coming, maybe you make some changes that you think in your mind are the right thing to do. So we put those back in place so that things are being done the way we expect them to be done. That's number one. Number two is I want to do a far more comprehensive audit of the schools. So the real deal is, so far we know there's $6.2 billion that we're underfunding our schools. That's about what the courts have said. Well, what is happening because we underfund those schools? We can take a look at all of the economic impact that happens simply due to that underfunding. So what happens with the arts? What happens with extracurricular activity? What happens because these children aren't getting the money that they deserve? Those are the kind of audits that I find to be very important, especially along the school line.
Let's talk more about your experience, Mark, in Lehigh Valley, and what kinds of reductions, actual results happened as a result of your work in Lehigh Valley. How did you help keep costs down? And certainly taxpayers want to know about any accomplishments there.
Yes. So pharmacy benefit managers, which we just talked about, you can also think about it as your insurance company. I did an audit there. And when I did the audit, I found $1.4 million out of $7 million that we were overspending just on pharmacy. We had then put that out to bid again, because they stopped me at $1.4 million. They were like, okay, you don't need to go any further. We put that out to bid. We found $3 million out of $7 million that is savings. That's a 3-year contract. That's the $9 million in savings. I've now done that on the medical side as well. There's $23 million that we spend on the medical side. I've already found $4 million worth of savings that we can achieve by changing the contract there, which hopefully the next time the contract comes up we'll do. Then on a regular basis I find money. We brought money back in last year, $500,000 in cash because of an overpayment that was made, a double payment where a vendor billed us for something twice. You know, we looked at the nursing homes.
And it got by someone's office and it was paid twice.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so we brought that back. The nursing homes, we found over $750,000 initially that we had billed but not collected from private residents. And unfortunately, that money was gone because those residents had since passed and their estates had been distributed. However, we stopped that from happening again. So while we weren't able to recover it, we were able to stop that process from happening again.
Now, here's something else I learned about the work you've been doing, Mark, and it has to do with divesting public money away from supporting certain candidates.
Yes.
What's that about?
So what I found out about was that right after Dobbs, I was looking to understand how I could help. And one of the things that I found was that our bank, Wells Fargo, donates to anti-choice candidates. And we have $145 million of taxpayer money sitting in Wells Fargo. And I called for us to divest all $145 million and put that into a nonpartisan bank so that both sides can be sure that their money isn't going to the other side.
How difficult was it to locate a nonpartisan bank anyway? It didn't even occur to me a bank would be partisan anyway, to tell you the truth.
It's very difficult, to be honest with you. There's only a few that do it, and the problem is there's even less that can handle 145 million. Right, and so we need to help our banks in that way, quite honestly, and move your account. I move mine to one that's nonpartisan.
Now, I understand you've held positions in other companies that I suppose have nothing to do with being a controller. Just tell us about that experience, which is apart from what we've talked about so far.
Yeah, so I worked at a company called Aviol, which was in the aviation industry. I was a senior staff member there. So we were involved in things.
Were you a numbers cruncher there too?
So my title was Vice President of Sales and Marketing. But it was over $1 billion company, and so what you end up doing is mostly talking about money. My background is in money. I have my MBA. I have my undergraduate in finance. And so when you're making decisions on marketing or anything, it really comes down to return on investment, future value of the dollar, present value of the dollar. That's a lot of the conversations that are going on. I then also worked at a company called DSM, was a $14 billion company, also senior staff there. I was much more involved in the money in that particular case because I ran much of the dollars that went through and raised much of the money. There was $14 million that I raised internally. So
you have experience raising funds.
Yes, I do.
Which occurs to me might be convenient for your current candidacy, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. That's all it's about these days is raising money.
And you know what, briefly on that subject, Mark, how do you go about then campaigning or raising funds for a political candidacy? And this is your first time running for a statewide office, right?
Yes. It's a lot of phone calls. It's just a lot of calls. You go through lists after lists and you make calls. You call your friends, you call your family, you call people that you don't know. And you sell them on the fact that you're the best qualified candidate for this particular job. But it's not easy by any stretch.
Especially with the people you don't already know.
Exactly, especially those people.
Now, I understand in a somewhat related position to what you hold right now, the controller position, you were a township commissioner
I was.
At some point. And tell our viewers, what are the similarities between that position and being a controller?
There aren't very specific similarities, but what I'll tell you is that the job of commissioner gave me insights as controller, right? So even just small things, and like something that I'm taking to the state with me, you learn about things like the municipal planning code, which is like when somebody does a development, what are the processes and procedures that you have to go through? And so when people are standing out in front of you yelling and screaming because there's a new 800 house development,
right?
How did it get there in the first place? And having that basic understanding, especially around the money part of it, really helps you have insight into what matters to people. Because look, I'm really about the people, not for the powerful. The goal is, how can I have audits that have impact on the people so that they have better lives?
And you have to let them know, too. I mean, do you have some kind of awareness campaign for letting the public know about your accomplishments if you're elected to this office?
Yes. I obviously, as I'm going around speaking all the time, that is what I'm talking about, my accomplishments. It's probably the biggest difference between me and my competitor. His background is not in finance. My background is in finance. He's a communications major. I'm a finance major. And it makes a difference when you're talking about a $40 billion budget.
Now, again, Josh Shapiro just made his latest budget proposal.
Yep.
And he talked about economic development, which always seems to be a very broad subject. So what can you tell me about anything that would be within your powers as Auditor General to help with economic development? Now, again, that's a broad umbrella. Take it any way you want.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things. So let's look at a wage theft as an issue, right? So wage theft hurts our economic development. So by changing that, you can help it.
And refresh our audience briefly on wage theft.
Yeah, so imagine you're a cashier and you work over 40 hours and your boss decides not to pay you overtime on the 45th, 50th, 60th hour that you're working, right? So that would be considered wage theft. And maybe because you're an employee that
it's that simple, he just stops paying you after a certain amount of hours.
Well, he may not stop paying you, he may not pay you overtime. Right? Or he may not pay you at all. Let's say you're a contractor, you had a 5-week job and the contractor doesn't pay you for the last 2 weeks. What are you going to do? Right? And so are you going to report it? Maybe, but probably not, because you need that job or you need that contractor to come back again. When you think about it from a union's perspective, what they'll do is misclassify. So
that was the word I was going to bring up. I understand that certain jobs can be misclassified and then the employee gets ripped off as a result.
Exactly right. So they're putting them at a lower level than what they're...
A lower rate.
A lower rate, thank you. And those are the kind of things that we can go after, especially if it's a state job, right? Because first off, what's it affecting? It's affecting the taxes that are being collected by the state. And by making sure that people are paying for good, solid work that you're doing, you're going to pay taxes. That helps our economic development. It helps our whole system grow.
Now, here's another point our governor brought up recently when he introduced his budget proposal, and that's being competitive with other states. Is that something an Auditor General looks at? In other words, do you look at adjacent states and say, hey, Maryland or Ohio is doing this, maybe we should emulate that?
I think an Auditor General should look always at stuff like that. How can we do better? Because part of what we look at are process and procedures. So in terms of the process and procedures, are there processes and procedures that are out there that are more effective than what we're doing that can save taxpayer money or grow taxpayer money? Going back to my time as when I worked at DSM, one of the things at Avial, one of the things that I ended up doing was working with people as they were getting ready to build a new facility. And we needed to make sure, very basic things, right? Like, so we would want to know that there was water, there was gas, there was electricity, there was internet back then. We wanted to make sure of that. But the other thing that we wanted to know was that the growth rate of the under 45 category was greater than 3.5%. In other words, we wanted to make sure the youth were coming in, that we weren't going to put ourselves in a spot where they were going to age out. And that's a problem that Pennsylvania has. Right, and these are the kinds of things that we need to do is keep the youth here. And those are definitely things that I'll be looking at to make sure that industry wants to come in.
And how can workforce development programs accommodate this group that you're targeting? And are we doing a good job of that currently?
I don't know that we're doing a good job of it currently. We are doing a job of it currently. It's something that I would want to investigate more. One of the issues, of course, is it's very... segmented right now. It's not under sort of one big umbrella where you could say, this is how it's being done in a standardized format so that we can measure its success. Right now, it's siloed. So I would want to take a look at that. I'm not saying that we should unsilo it yet. I'm saying that would be something that I would look at.
How would you like to change the status quo within the current Auditor General office right now?
So the current Auditor General, really he does what's required. So like we were talking about earlier, there's a set of requirements, that's what he does. He got rid of the school audit, which was unfortunate. But what I would want to do is take a look at some of these other kinds of audits. So for example, we spend over $1 billion in healthcare on the employees that we have within the state system. That's where there's easily $150 million or more that can be saved just by going back and renegotiating with the insurance companies. We spoke about the school audits. I would want to make sure that we really took a look at a school more holistically. So not just as the process and procedures, the financial audit that they're doing today, but a procedural audit. Make sure that we're doing things that can show the economic impact of our schools not doing what they could.
Now, we're trying to show our viewers the basics that are involved in the Auditor General's office, because frankly, it can be an office that cannot be thought about by the public for a while. So talk about how you're generating interest, besides appearing on our show here, of course, how you generate interest in your campaign. How do you frame it for Pennsylvanians to relate to so they can cast a vote for you?
So what I would say is it's probably one of the most important under-thought about jobs that there is, quite honestly. Why? Because it's about the money. Who else is following your money? Nobody. And if you want your $40 billion, looked at, I would suggest that you should, just like right now there's an office for Attorney General being voted on. You wouldn't vote for an Attorney General that doesn't have a law degree. You shouldn't vote for an Auditor General that doesn't have a finance degree. So that's one of the key elements that I would pitch to the viewers. But the other thing is, most recently, one of the audits that I did, I found a doctor that was misdiagnosing Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And so when that happened, they would remove the children from loving families. When I originally did the audit, I found 15 families that I spoke with where this had happened. And And there was a lot of pushback for me not to put this report out.
And due to a misdiagnosis, you say these kids were removed from their families.
That's right. So loving families, they were classified as child abusers, right? That's how they were classified because of this misdiagnosis. When we looked at it, after I put out the report, I had over 150 families call me saying, I thought I was the only one. And so when you think you're the only one, right, like this is when we can help, like especially when it's tied to money, right? And so, children and youth is tied to money. You think about guardian ad litems today, right? So guardian ad litems are lawyers.
Please.
Yeah, are lawyers that are assigned typically to children, but also to our elderly, in order to help them. There's a lot of
both ends of the vulnerable population.
Exactly right. And like right now, it's not really being handled that well. In some cases, I would say that we're underpaying the guardian ad litems. So for example, let's say that you get paid a flat fee, you have a child that's 2 hours away from you, so that's 2 hours there, 2 hours back, and some period of time with the child. Are you going to go do that? Rarely, right? The same thing on the elderly side. Maybe they're too far away. Maybe they can't really speak for themselves. So they end up taking the state's position rather than taking the individual's position. And those are things that we can look at. The judicial system in general, or especially around family judges, right? Because they're really struggling with, how do you understand if there's a misdiagnosis? What are the things that you need to do to make sure that they're not responsible for taking kids away from loving families?
And you said it was not an isolated case. How many cases approximately were involved?
So there was over 150 cases that I found out.
Was it an honest mistake, or was there something sinister going on here? I have to ask.
I don't feel as though it was sinister. I do feel that it was overzealous.
Okay.
And it turned out that this doctor had done the same thing up in New York and had done the same thing in Florida. But I don't know that it was sinister.
The history of the same misdiagnosis on the same disease.
Yeah.
Let's go back to talking about your campaign, Mark. And earlier you pointed out the challenges of contacting people you don't know.
Yeah.
So in the event when you do that, certainly they want some kind of explanation out of you as to what this office is about, what do you intend to do. And I figure you must have some capsule campaign, and it'll help us better understand your platform if you tell it to us.
Yep. So the basics is what I said earlier, which is I normally say, as controller, typically what we do is we audit payroll and we audit vendor payments. That kind of helps frame what the issue is.
People can understand that.
People can understand that. Then I tell them a little bit about what I do. So what I have done is I've saved the county $9 million in health care. I've brought back $500,000, due to overpayments. I called for Wells Fargo to divest $145 million. And not only can we do this at the county level, we can do this at the state level. So if you care about the schools, we can audit the schools, not the way they were audited, but the way we could look at the schools in an economic fashion, showing what happens to children. If you're interested in healthcare, we can audit the healthcare that we provide to our employees. And frankly, as a billion-dollar, buyer, we have influence. And if we have influence for us, other industries could then take advantage of that audit, right? So other corporations can take advantage of that audit and do the same thing. If you care about criminal justice system, we have probably the largest nursing home population in the jails. We can look at that and see, are there better ways of capturing, not capturing, but are there better ways of handling that situation that's less expensive to the taxpayer and has a better outcome for the prisoner?
Any plans for candidate forums at this point? Now, let's talk more about the task that will be in front of viewers in April, which will be to vote in the primary. And currently, that's between you and then your opponent here is Malcolm Kenyatta. So why not make some distinctions between Kenyatta and yourself?
Yeah. So probably the biggest distinction is I'm in finance. I've been in finance my entire career. So I have my MBA. I have my undergrad in finance. I've worked as senior staff in multi-billion-dollar companies, managing multi-million-dollar budgets. We have a $40 billion more budget for Pennsylvania. If you wanted to have somebody manage that, do you want somebody with a finance degree or do you want somebody with a communications degree? That's really that's the biggest light between us. We're both Democrats, right? We both want to do good things for people. There's no doubt about that. He's good in the job that he's doing as a rep, and I think that he should continue to do that job.
Any chance you two will face off in a candidate event at some point?
I'm hoping so. We did before. Let's see, when was it? Oh, state committee. They had a little event where we got to sort of debate-ish. I'm hoping we get to do that again. In fact, you guys taped that.
And you have about 2 minutes left in our program, Mark, so why not use that remaining time and just tell our viewers why they should vote for you?
Yeah. So once again, I'm going to go back to the number one reason to vote for me is my background. I've been doing this already. I am the controller. So the controller is exactly the same thing as the auditor, but it's at the county level. When you look at the stuff that I have done as controller, I've brought back $500,000. That's just last year. I brought back $1 million in the year before. We found over $1.2 million in the nursing home that I told you about. It started off with $750,000. We've saved $9 million. Okay, so I'm talking about a lot of money, right? It kind of can get boring. But the real issue is all of that money impacts people's lives. Right? And when I'm doing an audit, I'm thinking about the people's lives that I'm impacting, right? And it's not just about saving money on the front end, it's saving money across the stream, right? So maybe we'll pay a little bit more now, but we'll save money later. I did an audit on the prison system, and I found that for every dollar that a prisoner spent in phone calls, 70 cents of it was going to us as a commission. So last year we made $750,000 off of the backs of prisoners. Now, I don't agree with that. That's up to the public to decide what they want to do with it. But my goal
is your local prison system.
Local prison system. My job is to bring that to light. And then, the citizens get to decide whether or not they want to do anything about that. But at least it's to light, and they know about it. And so I'm going to be working on transparency. I'm going to be working on things for the people. At the very local level, making sure that you understand how your tax dollars are being spent, and frankly, and working with the different agencies to make sure that they're treating our people fairly.
Mark Pinsley, Democrat for Pennsylvania's Auditor General, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.